Here we go. Welcome back into another episode of Cherry Picking. One day for the first NHL regular season game. It's not being played in North America, but that doesn't matter. We're still going to be watching it. I think it's a 2 p.m. start for us Eastern Standard folk.
I can't wait.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be a good season this year, a pretty busy off season. So obviously, lots to get into, especially in terms of fantasy hockey. Today, we're going to be talking about 2 breakout players each. This can apply to fantasy hockey for sure, but it also applies just to regular hockey as well. Just looking at where the career arc of some of these players that we have and what their potential is coming into this year. Their numbers may have been down a little bit last year or years getting into the league, and now we think for whatever a couple reasons, these are going to be the guys who are going to hit their iceberg and their tipping point to kind of start producing big points. So, Gav, who is your first breakout player for the 2022-23 NHL season? Yeah,
so I kind of did this with a bit more of a fantasy approach too, but my first breakout player is Alex Newhook. I said this on the first cherry picking video of the season, actually, that I'm really high on Alex Newhook this year. He's currently going around 246 ADP. Last year in 77 games, he had 33 points, 6 power play points. Currently getting drafted around guys like Duclair, Jordan Staal, and Jack Quinn. And he was only averaging 13 minutes per game last year. When you look at Kadri leaving now, there's a huge spot that he could fill, taking over that second center role ahead of JT Compher. It's not set in stone for sure yet, but it's looking really likely with reports coming out of camp. And that line would be with Nichushkin and Evan Rodriguez. So pretty elite line, top 6 ice time. That's a huge step from last year. He's obviously not going to see any PP1 time unless someone goes down with an injury. But Colorado's PP2 is still elite. It's Devin Taves, Nichushkin, Bowen Byram. That power play is arguably better than a lot of teams' power play 1. So there's a lot of potential here. And then in terms of fantasy, he's going so late in the drafts that it's a bit of a gamble. I'm not saying that he is going to make up for Kadri's production, but it's definitely worth the risk at that ADP.
No, 100%. I think with kind of how this guy's career has gone so far, he hasn't really been given, like you said, he only played 13 minutes of ice time in the game last year. He played 71 games in the NHL, so first full season, kind of getting his feet wet. I think he comes into a role here that's kind of vacant with Kadri leaving, obviously, and I think he's going to have to be producing points along, like it's either going to be him or JT Compher, kind of like what he said, and I would put more stock in Alex Newhook for sure. Yeah,
for sure. Like this is kind of, it's not necessarily make or break, but he's going to have all the opportunity in the world to take advantage of this situation, and he was a 16th overall pick, so he's skilled forward, he's a great player. We're hoping that he's going to put up more points this year. 33 is a bit low, but with only 33 minutes of ice time, it's actually pretty respectable.
Wow, I actually thought he was a much higher draft pick, to be honest. I thought he was like
16.
I thought he was like a top 10 pick for whatever reason.
Yeah, I did too. Because he was with Zegras and those guys, right, in 2020?
He's American, so yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, he's Canadian.
Is he?
Yeah, he's from Nova Scotia, I think.
Oh, is he really?
I think so, yeah.
He's totally American. Good for him. Oh, yeah, became the 3rd player this offseason to win the Stanley Cup from Newfoundland and Labrador.
Newfoundland. There you go.
Fun facts you guys didn't need to know or you wanted to learn on the Cherry Picking podcast, even not in the long form.
Okay, Ryan, let's hear your breakout player.
Yeah, so my first breakout player, he's been in the league for 2 years now, but it's Tim Stutzle on the Ottawa Senators. People might think like, oh, he already broke out. Well, not really. Last year, he only put up 58 points, which is on a Senators team. Obviously, last year that was good, but for a guy that went so early in the draft, his ceiling has definitely not been hit yet. And I think this is the year we see Tim Stutzle go from 60 points to 80 points. And the reasons being, for one, and I'd kind of like to throw this to you or kind of see if you agree with it, for starters, for like amongst of the starters, like the Sens top 6 forwards, I would say like now they're probably a top 5 group. If in terms of depth and skill, and just names on the paper, obviously we haven't seen this team on the ice fully together yet. But, I mean, Tim Stutzle, Brady Tkachuk, Drake Batherson, Claude Giroux, Alex DeBrincat, and Josh Norris.
Yeah, and like last year, he was pretty much just playing with like a bottom 6 on most teams, really, right? So there's definitely a huge step up this year on that Sens team. I'm really interested to see how it plays out. Like, I don't know how I feel about Giroux this year. Like, I know he's always been that underrated the guy in Philly. Like, he'd put up like 95, 100 points, and you're like, holy, like what the hell? Like no one would ever really talk about him. He'd never be in the conversation for MVP, but I don't know. It's interesting to see how they're going to be this year. How does DeBrincat fit in? But then, like, all those guys are so young.
Yeah, that's also a huge thing. But I think the thing with Giroux too now, like you have Tim Stutzle and probably playing on a line with DeBrincat. I think Giroux adds that veteran presence a little bit. Obviously, he's played in the playoffs a bunch of time, trying to like figure out kind of what this team needs to do to make that next step. So I think he will be an extremely valuable piece to Tim Stutzle's production this year. And I think if he continues and plays on this line with DeBrincat and Giroux throughout the entire season, I think it will definitely be a huge factor. DeBrincat, a guy who scored 31 goals, 42 goals last season, he will be able to crush it with a top goal scorer like this. He's obviously never played with a guy in the NHL with the ability to score 40 goals. That will just add to his assist totals for sure. Yeah. And then if you look at Stutzle's shooting percentage last year, it was 12%, which is actually pretty low for forwards, especially of guys for a guy that caliber. We saw an increase from his rookie season. His rookie season was 10.8, moved up to 12. So if we see his shot totals and shooting percentage increase by just a small margin, there's really no reason why he can't have 30 to 35 goals. Yeah. And then, like I mentioned, playing with DeBrincat, the assists will be there as well. And his goals above expected last year was actually -4. So he technically actually underperformed last year compared to what the league average was. And I think this year with a new lineup, I think really you could chalk all that stat to a bad Senators lineup and it being his first full season in the NHL. And the Senators were pretty much losing a lot of the games that they were playing as well. He's in a much better position to succeed this year. And the last thing I'm really high on, and the reason why I'm really high on him, is his usage on the power play is actually probably quite underrated. He had 26 power play points last year. And if you look at his time on the power play in terms of share possible ice time, he was second only behind Chabot. So the highest forward out of the guy of the group last year. I'm sure that'll change a little bit this year. Obviously bring in DeBrincat and Giroux, but I think that you can kind of trade that off with how much more efficient this Sens power play will be. 6 of one, half a dozen the other. So Tim Stutzle is one of my breakout players this year. I think he's going to have an awesome year. Yeah,
I really like that. I can't really argue it at all. I'm not quite sure how their power play is going to shape out yet because I'm looking at it right now. This is again like preseason. These things change so much. It really depends. But it's like Kachuk, Norris, Batherson, DeBrincat, and Chabot on the first power play unit. But then like the second unit is still stacked with Pinto, Forman, Giroux, and Stutzle. So I really like that. You can't really go wrong with it. I think he's definitely due for a breakout year. It's third year now. He's still young. Yeah. Definitely a bright spot for that team.
Yeah, and good thing to note too. One of the reasons why he's used so much on the power play, he kind of plays that quarterback role as well. Yeah. To a certain extent, playing on the point. So I don't think it's pretty unlikely you'll see him on that power play one because Chabot obviously plays that role on the first power play. So, but regardless, I think this guy will be able. He's going to be used a ton, and I think by the end of the season we'll be seeing Tim Stutzle with 80 points. So
yeah, I can see that.
Who is the second guy?
So my second guy is Rasmus Dahlin. Never
Dahlin.
Told Ryan about this before, but I really like him this year. Some people might think he kind of broke out last year. He went from like 35 points to 53, but I don't think he's anywhere close to his ceiling yet. And I'll tell you why. So last year, Rasmus Dahlin was third among defensemen advanced stats and top 3 defensemen with Fox and Yossi. So he's top 3 there on a team that couldn't even score.
Yeah.
So this year, I really like the Sabres because they've gotten better. Guys are getting older. Tage Thompson's going to look to have another great year.
Yes, sir. Definitely.
And then another thing is that this scenario reminds me a lot of Nathan MacKinnon. And I'll tell you why this as well is because MacKinnon never really broke out until his 5th year. He was on weak Avalanche teams. And same kind of thing for Dahlin. I know they're different positions, but weak Buffalo teams, and they're due for a breakout year. It's his 5th year. You've seen him. He's been elite. The advanced analytics show that he can be elite. He just hasn't quite found that production yet. So right now he's currently going in like the 8th round, 6th round of drafts. I could see him totally being up there in value with guys like Fox and Yossi if he really does step through and make the breakthrough this season.
You think, like, in terms of points and stuff?
Yeah, like I could think he could easily be like a 70, 80 point defenseman this year.
That's definitely a bold prediction. I like it, though. This Buffalo team, it's tough to always peg where this Buffalo team, last couple of years, it's pretty easy to say they're going to be shit. But this year, I think a lot of people are a little bit higher on them. I think they finally have found a couple of prospects that they've actually been able to develop. I think we're starting to see it now. Casey Middlestat's been a little bit of a disappointment, but Tage Thompson's been great. Then they have probably 3 young guys this year that are going to be able to show out. You have Dylan Cousins, Peyton Krebs even in that getting him over in that Eichel deal with Tuck, and then Owen Power as well on the point. Hopefully at some point with Rasmus Dahlin would be that'd be an insanely good duo.
Yeah, and I think a good thing too is that I can't remember the last time the Sabres had like any positive kind of aura around them. I think they got rid of all of that. Not many people, like, the expectations aren't too high. Like whenever they drafted Eichel, it was like he was compared to McDavid and they were expected to ramp up really quick. And the team's kind of reset. They've done a lot of the right things. They're expected to slowly ramp up. And I think Rasmus Dahlin can take the next step on this team, especially if players are producing, because his advanced stats suggest that he should be getting more points. He's among the top 3 playmaking defensemen in the league. So if he can really take advantage of this year, it's a great spot.
Yeah, definitely. The one thing in terms of fantasy, if you do play with like plus minus or something, it could be something to worry about a little bit. I still think this is going to be a team with a losing record this year, and Dahlin's plus minus last couple of years has been horrible. I don't think it's really for him to blame. It's just like Gav said, this team has just never really been that good.
Yeah.
So the last guy that we're going to be talking about for breakout players, in a similar situation, but I would say they're still a little bit behind in terms of where they're going, and that's Vince Dunn on the Seattle Kraken. So he started his career on the Blues. He actually won the Stanley Cup with the Blues, had a great start to his career, and then obviously move to Seattle in the expansion draft. I think Vince Dunn is in a great position to break out this year, to be honest. It's hard to pick a breakout player on a team that's this shit, but like I said, exclude the plus minus and just look at personal accolades for Dunn this year. He's on the ice all the time for this team. He plays on the first D pair alongside Adam Larson, and then the first power play as well. And this is a guy who had a career high last year in hits, blocks, and tied his career high in points. Last year he played a decent amount actually with Lausanne, who's obviously a little bit worse than Larson, but the bulk of his play did come with Adam Larson, and his numbers were completely different and much better alongside Adam Larson. You look at in terms of goals expected with these two guys on the ice. With Lausanne, it was only 9.9. When he's on the ice with Larson, it shot up all the way to almost 20. So in terms of offense production, it's definitely a better thing for Vince Dunn to be playing with Adam Larson. He had 35 points last year, but I really think it could have been a little bit higher. His shooting percentage really dropped off last season, went from 8.2 to 5.8. I think you'll generally see that in a new group, especially in a completely new team. He's playing on a St. Louis team that he's very familiar with, so an 8.2 to 5.8 drop off isn't that crazy, but I could definitely see it coming back up again. He only had 121 shots last year, so to be honest, having 121 shots with a shooting percentage that low and putting up 35 points isn't really that bad. Like, he had 28 assists, which is pretty solid. So I think his goal total will definitely shoot up a little bit this year. He averaged 1.4 points per 60 minutes last season, which is pretty solid to play when you're playing on a team that's this caliber.
Yeah.
And he just has one more year to gel with Adam Larson. I think that would be really important. And then also just the Seattle team in general. I think, another year with this group, it hasn't changed too much. I would say over the offseason, they kept a lot of the right players, added a few more pieces on the offensive side as well. So if he can get his shooting percentage back up to like 8, I really don't think it's a stretch to say he can have 50 points this season and break out as just one of the better players on the Seattle team. He is turning 26, so generally that's kind of the tipping point on, is this guy going to be a solid defenseman that you can rely on for the rest of his career, or is he's hit his plateau and he's not going to really get there? I think Vince Dunn is going to exceed that this year.
Yeah, I like this a lot too. Like I know we said not to put too much stock in rookies, but I do really think that Seattle power play is going to be really good this year with Beniers on it. He is a power play specialist. If you have Vince Dunn there quarterbacking the whole thing, I really don't see how he doesn't put up more points, especially only 35 last year?
Yeah, 35 points last year.
I think it'll be pretty hard for him not to surpass that. That whole team was pretty much an offensive black hole.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to kind of say the Seattle team last year. I was really high on the Kraken last year, to be honest, going into the season. I thought they were going to have this.
I can't believe that.
I was thinking they were going to have a similar kind of expansion draft.
They could have had such a better team, though.
You think so? I just think they tried to focus on a very defensive-minded team, and it just blew up in their face. Like, Grubauer, obviously not what he was expected to be, considering he went from Colorado to this team.
Yeah.
Like, without those kind of skill players, I obviously shouldn't have eaten the cheese and looked into that. And then Adam Larson, too, to be honest, he's kind of been a disappointment ever since he got traded for Taylor Hall. His numbers were a little bit better last year in the defensive zone, but still nothing really to
I
hold
guess,
your hat
too,
on.
like they're not in the cap hell like Vegas is. Like, they could have had guys like Tarasenko, but I guess they really didn't want to take on that contract. They don't really have much to worry about. I'm looking at their roster right now, and like up and down, there's nothing that's like insane or crazy that sticks out, but it's pretty solid and overall well-rounded. I don't know where they finish in the Pacific this year. What do you think?
I think in the Pacific, I still think they're going to be a bottom feeder in this league this season. But they do have young pieces, Matty Beniers, Shane Wright, and we can even add Vince Dunn to that list. He's still not 26 yet, so he's still eligible as a young gun, I guess you could say.
Young guns.
But yeah, those are the breakout players we think are going to have great years this season. Like we mentioned, one day when this video comes out before the NHL season starts. So we're really fired up. Let us know in the comments who you're looking out for to see to break out this season. Other players you think might have a down year. We're always interested. Join the Discord. Follow us on Twitter too. Throughout the season, Gavin and I will be posting our picks on Twitter. We're talking about DFS lineups and any sort of fantasy hockey news you kind of need to know about. So be sure to follow us on Twitter. Obviously, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.